like the idea that there
Yeah.
might be a whole field called anti-design that you can specialize in, just being really awful. And all you do is offer your services as a validator for actual investment in design.
You could just have someone show up and just point out all the ugly.
I think
There
they're
is
called
actually,
senior designers.
okay, let's go. Hello, I'm Kit Friend of Accenture's Atlassian Partnership Team.
And I'm Kriska with Collabsoft.
Welcome to Designing Teams, a podcast drafted together by us, where we'll get a backstage look at the world's most daring and innovative companies. Through candid conversations with creative legends, we explore how designers really work with teams, beyond the wireframes and workflows to spark ideas, build momentum, and co-create magic.
Expect tales of triumph, creative tensions, beautifully messy collaborations, and a dash of flamingo-based estimations.
Whether you're a designer, a team lead, or just wondering what happens when art meets agile, get ready, because this is about to get messy.
Hello, Marek. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good,
nice
mate.
to be on.
Missing you. Yeah, for those that don't know
missing you
you
big
as well
time.
as I do, you should introduce yourself, buddy.
Hi, I'm Marek, creative legend, or by day a freelance product designer for early stage startups. But I prefer the term creative legend.
I like how you did
And
mention what
modest.
you do at night as well. That was good. That was awesome.
Being a creative legend is a 24/7 job, so it's day and night.
Like being a
Superb.
vigilante, maybe. There we go.
We worked together at Old Street on custom charts, and Marek, really changed our business and
Yeah,
showed
Chris gave me my start.
a
in this
design
world.
skeptic like me how beautiful the world could be.
I feel like all of your discussions start with being the skeptic about the topic, Chris, and then you get inducted in something by someone.
I'm the grumpy old man in a Disney movie that gets transformed by happier people around me.
It's the sneak peek of our AI conversation at the end of this podcast.
Yeah.
Ah,
we don't need to
beautifully
be here
introduced.
these days, right? It could just do it all for us. We'll just put the prompts in.
So, what is the title of today's topic? I say, being a well-prepared host, we're talking about AI and design. What specifically?
Well, I think Marek and I were keen not to talk about AI and design until we hit the obligatory mention of AI and design that has to happen with every topic there. So
We'll see how long we
yeah.
can keep it going without mentioning AI from now.
I mean, haven't we already failed? Okay, from there. Second.
Yeah, from
It's
now.
okay, we declared it.
Yeah, from now. Yeah.
All right. Well, I don't know what we're talking about then.
No, well, me and Kit were chatting just before you graced us with your presence that maybe it might be good to start out with defining design, because I was saying whenever you talk about design, it's a good foundation, right? Because I think everyone has a different definition of it, which is why it's difficult to talk about. And I think if you asked 100 people what the definition of a software developer is, 100 people would say someone that writes code. Whereas with design, I think you'd get 100 different answers. So, yeah, if one of you wants to start with what your definition of design would be.
Drawing pictures, isn't it?
During pictures, I think that would come
Chris-
up quite
Chris is the
highly in the
problem.
100 people.
Yeah. Make it pop.
Make it pretty.
They make it
Make
pretty,
the
Marek.
logo bigger.
How many of your Slack messages to each other will make it pretty, Marek, around like giving things across?
Thankfully, none. Chris wasn't my direct manager.
I should have really looked it up when we had the chat earlier around things, right? I like to think it's about bringing some sort of intentionality to the way that we make things, right? So I think without design, you've got a random cobbled together set of ideas. I think design for me is about bringing intent to how things are put together.
Okay, yeah, I like that. I think it's a better one than Chris's.
Incrementally. But you
Because I
draw
think
pretty
that-
pictures to make that happen, right?
Yeah, because that's the thing, right? With like, if you're having a design podcast and you want to talk about designing teams and stuff, I think because design is so variably defined, it then means it's so variably implemented in teams. Because my definition of it would be, I'll tell you how I see it. For me, design, because I started as a computer scientist, so we had the like. In the modules, like software development modules, they would say, you know, the whole point of design is that you figure out what you want to build before. So that was always my foundation. And that's, I think, what a lot of it is about, like the wireframing, the iterations, making sure that what you spend the time developing and marketing is actually what you want to build. And like when my mum asks me what I do for work, the analogy I always try and use is that I'm like the architect of a building. So the architect defines like what it should look like, and you go through those small clay models to figure it out before constructing it. Because once you construct it, if you want to change it, you've got to like knock the building down, right? And you define the materials and what the space should be like, and the lighting, and all of these things, and like the structural integrity. But you have the architect there to make the best use of that construction time. So for me, that's what it's always been about. And that even I was going to say the word, but we'll get onto that later. So yeah, for me, that's what it's about. For me, that's the point of design.
I admit I was aiming for a one-liner, but yours is more eloquent around things. So.
Thanks.
But it's funny, right? Because I was relating to Marek, and I came from the opposite end, right? In that my studies were design around things. I don't think we ever got asked to define what it was that we were doing around things. There was just an underlying assumption you kind of knew. And I think you're dead right, Marek. That, like, probably assuming people know what you're talking about when you say design is a leap too far for most humans generally, and certainly in like organizations where you're asking people to interact and make something together.
But that's what I find so frustrating about the design community is every 6 months you see a post blow up where someone's like redefined design, or there's like design is changing and this is the new term. And we always like redefine ourselves every 5 years. Before it was UX UI, now it's product design. So we can't even agree on what we do. That's what we're here to figure out.
With the truth bomb, Chris. Yeah, we'll work it out
Well,
between each other.
it's just, I mean, just for me shows that it's a relatively new art form, right? Like if it's having to redefine itself.
Oh, that's quite a one to unpick, though, right? I'm like, depends where you draw the lines. Like, was the bloke with the cave painting a designer? I don't know.
I'm not sure what Leonardo da Vinci would say about that.
Yeah. He
Not
probably
much
wouldn't
is
have
dead.
said I'm a designer, though, to that point,
No.
right? Like, he wouldn't have picked that
True.
word. And I don't actually know when the word entered the common lexicon or whatever the term is for these things. It would be interesting when people shifted from defining as, like, I'm an artist or a maker or an inventor to saying the word design as something intentional. I bet if we looked at it as like a Bauhaus route or something, like one of those schools of thought where they
So,
started
Kit,
branding.
you were
themselves
saying
that way.
last episode about how design has always been intuitive in other fields, such as furniture. And I realised it's not. Like, if you go around like the Gaudi Museum in Barcelona, he was one of the earliest people, or at least one of the most prominent early people, to actually carefully think about how to make a door handle that's ergonomic and a chair that's nice to sit in. And before that, people just went, "There's a block of wood, don't complain." Like, so I guess Gaudi is my answer. That's the first designer.
You said it here first. Those are like the things.
Come at me in the comments. It's fine.
Yeah, you can argue with things. I remember actually saying the British Museum, seat of controversially sourced items globally around things. I remember they have like a seconds collection where you can handle the exhibits because they're not deemed to be the precious ones. And they've got like a flint. It's not an axe. It's like a sort of rudimentary scalpel. And it's really interesting because it's not Homo sapien. It's not humans that made it. It's one of the other kind of species. I think it's Homo erectus, which will cause Chris to snigger in the background with things. And but the interesting thing is it's intentionally shaped, right? So it's not just a lump of stone that got knocked off somewhere. You can see where someone, let's call it a someone, depending where you draw the lines on kind of individual definition as well. Like someone's chipped it to be ergonomic. Around things so it can be used, and I think that's really interesting. Like for me, that shows like intent. That's like I am making this to be more usable than just the thing that I've come up with, the block of wood for Chris's Gaudi door handle on things there. So I think it's really ancient by that definition.
From my knowledge of prehistory, though, there used to be lots of different types of species of humans, and we killed them all. So did we, in fact, cancel the first set of designers to exist?
Designers 1.0 got cancelled.
And that's why it struggled to re-emerge. We did a Pol Pot on the first design crew to show up.
I was not expecting this podcast to be so controversial in the language around design.
They were going through layoffs. It was a tough time economically. There had to be some layoffs. What can you say? The bottom line needed protecting. And designers are always the first to go, so historically it
Oh,
makes
that is
sense.
true. Yeah, yeah, that is
You know,
definitely true. Their history is great, perceived to be disposable contributors to the team, right?
as is then, so is now.
So there we go. But yeah, I think that the definition of design, that's probably one we should add to the roster of things we should always ask Chris. Because I reckon to Marek's point around ask 100 people, I bet even if we have 100 designers on with us, I bet their
Yeah.
definition is not the same.
See how Chris's answer evolves every episode as well. I can't wait for him to talk about it being architecture next week.
You're just watching a Neanderthal evolve before your very eyes.
Yeah, the earliest, I'll have to find an even earlier example to cite each week because Chris will catch up with me as we go with things as well. So we've already gone from Gaudi to prehistoric man or Neolithic man. Yeah, there you go. But yeah, I think it's a really good one to start with. And like, do you think that definition is changing, Marek? Like when you think back, like what you were told was a designer when you started and what was asked of you to what you're asked today, is it the same?
I think what I've noticed is the different sub factions it can go into and the different nuance between that. So there's UX, UI, but then with UI, there's graphic designers, motion designers, interaction designers, even web design is different to app design. You can do animations, you can make iconography, and then on the UX side of things, there's people that just wireframe. There's more like the dev handover phase. Design engineering has gotten really popular recently, really being that link between design and dev, design systems. So I think you see it on the surface as just this one thing. But then now I've been in it for a few years, I see the sub elements of it. But being freelance for early stage, I kind of am that all in one. I have to manage all of it. And I think a lot of designers are because classically there are 10 developers for every one designer in most organizations. So most designers really need to span all elements. But I think it's when you understand how much nuance there is to it, you realize that you can't really be a master of all of them. And even then that's on just the physical like design side, but then designers are often expected to be researchers and do competitive analysis and do all of these other things that are required to do good design.
Yeah, I was interested whether your definitions of design have like shifted, or maybe other people's definitions of what you do. And like with that array of skills, like how do you get started? Like how do you build up that bizarrely mixed kind of portfolio
It's a
of
really good
skills?
question actually, and I think it kind of ties back into that different definitions because with design there is no way into it. It's a real wild west of people that have come into it from very different angles. Like these days, if you want to become a developer, at least 90% of people have a degree in it, right? You have to have gone through that 3 years of doing computer science. Whereas with design, you people come in from it from graphics, people coming in from it from programming, people come in from it from psychology. So there's all of these different ways in, which means people start from very different positions, and it really needs to span like UX UIs. It needs to span. Some people can make things look beautiful, amazing landing pages with amazing visuals, and that's what most people would think design is. But then that's one end of the spectrum, and the other end of the spectrum is making it work really well and understanding the coding and the technical stuff behind it, which is because of my background a lot more of what I can do. So I think you kind of start wherever you are with your background, right? If you've come in from graphics, then you go more into the visual side of things. Then you understand, oh, if I actually want to be better at this, I need to understand how it's built. And then from where I came in, I had a pretty good understanding that you need to consider how this thing is going to be built. And then realizing, oh, but how nice it looks and the different interactions and motion and all of these things play a part in that overall experience as well. So yeah, I think you find what your strengths are and then kind of just go out into filling your weaknesses. But every designer does have weaknesses when they start because you come in from one of those areas.
Other than you, the creative legend, of course.
Other than me.
No weaknesses.
Other than me. Yeah.
I do think it's interesting that I agree with you. I've always viewed like an element of constraint, actually in lots of disciplines, but like an appreciation of constraint can often give you much more interesting outcomes. Now, I think it's definitely true with design. Like a lot of the classic designs and approaches to things are like riffing off the material that's used or the way that things are constructed, rather than starting with a sketch that's like impossible to make and then handing that off to the maker to go like, here, my sketch looks fabulous, now make this happen around things. So yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you've heard of the book like Steal Like an Artist or that concept, right? Um, and so that's the case in design, but I also remember in computer science we were doing this website building module where we had to build a Spotify equivalent, and the guy said, I can't remember exactly what part of it we were making, but he was like, if you're doing this component, like don't reinvent the wheel. People much smarter than you have spent much longer than you figuring out this problem. So I feel sometimes, especially with design, people can over design and think through it and think they need to reinvent the wheel because they need to be unique every time. But I think it's always worth considering that other people have spent a really long time figuring these things out. And there's another really big element of that, especially with like mental models and the way people learn to navigate systems and tools. Where if you go up and look at a door handle, you know what it looks like, and you've used that before, so you know how it works. And that's the same thing with especially digital tech. Most people use the same 10 products like Google and Facebook and Instagram. So they kind of just define these patterns of how people expect things to work and how they expect things to use with like if there's a bottom navigation or a side navigation. So you really don't want to reinvent the wheel with those things. So when it comes to Steal Like an Artist, it's take from and learn from the best out there, and then you kind of mold that together, and it's understanding this is what we're trying to achieve and picking the best elements from those things to achieve that like overall goal.
One of my colleagues, Throff Klatt, is a big fan of Christopher Alexander's book, The Timeless Way of Building. And I don't know
Okay.
if either of you have read it,
Not
but
heard of it.
it's all about the patterns that, particularly in architecture and design, are just satisfying for humans. And it's really interesting as they run through them. And you can look at like a space or a building, or like I think you can even follow it through into products and user experience of digital things. But you're like, oh yeah, every time I did use something where it had that difficult to quantify element of niceness and kind of you were like, oh, this feels good. It had these things true about it. My favourite one that always comes up is they're saying like windows on two sides of a room like comes up, and it's like if you think about your quintessential space, so like Marek's in a lovely room now. I bet there's windows on more than one side.
Yeah, a lot of
And
windows.
it's true of all these things that spark something nice for humans, and so they have this pattern library behind it. And the idea is you can throw these together, well, not throw them together willy-nilly, but you can put together these patterns without reinventing the wheel, like Marek's saying, to create something that is intuitively nice for humans to experience through things. So, big fan of the pattern libraries.
Yeah. Fair. Nice. I was just gonna say before, I think the hard to quantify is a really good point as well, because design is very, very hard to quantify in most things. It's really hard to measure what impact doing it this way versus doing it that way is going to have, and what impact it has on the business metrics, and because people don't understand it and what it is, and it's hard to quantify. I think that goes down to why it's then really undervalued a lot of the time. Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that you realize maturing as a designer is you need to be understanding how to quantify it more and more. That's one of the biggest things I've had in my evolution as a designer, is understanding, okay, what are the underlying metrics? How can we be monitoring them? How's it affecting the conversion? Because there are ways to do it. But again, you need to get the investment from the CEO or the wider product team that it's worth spending that time to get the developers to implement the analytics or run the experiments or run the research.
So I guess the classic we always have to talk about for where design is actually valued is Apple, right? So is Apple like the dream firm for someone like you to work at, or the dream product to work on, or is there anyone else that you'd set as like the icon of like, here to be a designer here would be success for me?
I think that, yeah, there's different elements to it. Apple definitely is up there. Airbnb is another one because of just how design led they are. I think anyone working in tech, Google's always the one that people go, wow, Google, and that's not even necessarily from a design point of view. It's more just from wider tech. But then maybe not more niche ones, maybe a newer one is Vercel. They're like a web hosting platform, and they're kind of spearheading this design engineering concept where designers are actually getting into code and having much more say in the interaction and bridging that gap. So I think there are different ones for like the sub elements that you're interested in. But yeah, Apple's definitely up there. Yeah, but that's a very historic thing as well. Like they put it at their core so early on.
So, Marek, you talked about getting companies and teams to value design better. I find some things the best way to do that, the best business case to build, is show the absence of it or show bad design. And actually preparing the ground for your hiring at Old Street, I led the team in an exercise where we bought as many logos as we could. I gave $500. And the brief was, I want as many logos as you can buy on Fiverr with that money. So sort by cheap, right? And every $5 logo maker out there, we got to make the custom charts logo. And there's a great video of the team going through these god-awful logos for an hour and everyone just cringing and vomiting. And that was how I made the business case that we needed to hire you.
I did not know that story. That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
that's a great exercise. No, I never saw it.
It's amazing.
Yeah. I bet the quality varied massively.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, it's amazing how like you'd see something and be like, oh my god, that's terrible, and then you'd see something even worse and be like, oh. Like the best one looked like good, but I would say it looked like a high-end kebab shop. So you realise like how important signaling is and expectations and patterns and. Sometimes that is the best way to show the absence of a thing.
I like the idea that there might be a whole field called anti-design that you can specialize in, just being really awful, and all you do is offer your services as a validator for actual investment in design.
I mean, sure, there's like penetration testing, right? Like seeing how easily breakable your system is, how insecure it is, and likewise, you could just have someone show up and just point out all the ugly.
Yeah.
I think they're called senior designers.
It's funny actually. There's a William Gibson's book Pattern Recognition. The lead character is like allergic to over-branded products, so she like sands off the logos on all her jean buttons and things. And I think it's really interesting how people can get oversensitive. We always talk about like OCD to Comic Sans and certain like design things that will like trigger stuff there. Actually, that's a good one, Marek. Like, is there any things that trigger your designer OCD, like that we could look out for in Chris's $500 logo kind of sweep?
I think that I think most designers' main frustration is just when what they design isn't what gets implemented. Like details get skipped out on because you spent so much time obsessing over these details and you think they're really important. And then the developers don't abide by them. They don't have the same attention to detail. And then QA don't spot them. And then they add it to the backlog to come back round and fix. And then it doesn't. So, and that's the thing with design systems. And I think even the design engineering and how the term that shall not be named, I think will be changing things. I think it will help with those difficulties. I think designers will be getting in code more, and I think design systems will be easier to implement. So, because developers don't care about those details, and I don't think they ever will. So there needs to be another solution to it that helps them not care about it and still have like the outcome that designers want. But yeah, for me, that's the biggest annoyance is things not being implemented the way I wanted them to be.
Which I assume is the whole time, right? That's the need for these things.
No, you say that. Not all the time. Yeah, I've had some projects where things get done pretty well. Because as well, I think it also depends like how much the people that are implementing care about it, and then how much senior leadership care about it to have the fixes put in. Yeah, So, not all the time.
And this is an episode for definitions, so it appears, although we didn't plan it that way. So, what's a design system, Marek? That I feel like a lot of people will hear you ask that sentence and go like, I know like the
Yeah.
system for my discipline.
Yeah, it's also kind of hard to define as well. People have different definitions for it. So at least the way I see it, it's capturing the design decisions that you make, so that you don't have to make them again, and so that everyone's aligned on it. So and the reason to do that is so that things stay aligned, because designers are in one tool, they're all in Figma, they're creating everything in there, and then there just is not this bridge really to take them to the code. So if you aren't really clearly outlining that this button needs to be this color, and the developers know that, so they're always making it the same. If every time they come to make a button, they and they use a different blue, then on your interface you're going to have different color blues everywhere, which very subtly is unprofessional and lowers the professionalism of the product. So there's one thing from like a consistency sense to capture all of those things. And then another one is just for the general like efficiency of the team. So if every time I'm creating a component and we have a specific color that we use for it, this, I think it sounds really boring, but I find it really interesting that if you want to capture the decision, like what color is our text, right? And you have like maybe different colors of text, of the default text or a subtle text color, because there's like semantic definitions and I can't remember what the others, but basically you can have like a color that's like blue 500, blue 400, and these different tones of blue. But then that's not semantic, right? It's not it might not be like the subtle or the disabled color that you use in these different contexts when you're actually creating the interface. So you can always go back and know that, okay, that was the decision I made. That's what it's always going to be, and we're all aligned on that. And then there's another where that's like the building blocks, like the core components of how you're making the designs. But then there's also the actual components you're creating. So the buttons, the tabs, and that's the thing, especially with app design, is it's 80% the same component. Every website is a secret. If you look at even the screen in front of you, right, it will be text with buttons that are then formed into these bigger components of text and buttons and layouts, and so it's very repeatable. So it's then incredibly inefficient as a team if the designer doesn't have like a component that is set and aligned, and that's just always the one they pull from. If they have to recreate it every time, it's super inefficient. And it's the same thing for the developers. If every time they come to code the interface, if they have to keep on recreating the button, it's then also really inefficient. And then where the design system comes in is how you capture those decisions and how you make sure that the designers and developers are aligned on those things. Because that's the thing, is design and development are very different skill sets. So design is defining the what, and what you're making, and developers are then building it. But they're done in two very different tools. So bridging that gap is still an area that is very much being worked on, as Chris can probably tell you.
Chris, I love your questions. I feel like I'm monopolizing with Marek and having a love in on the design front. Like, what's on the normal hit list that you like to take from his mind now that you don't have the opportunity every day to be bothering him?
Yeah, he doesn't have instant access to me.
I would be curious. So, like, you've worked at a few places now. What was it like coming into a sort of startup that had never really had a designated design person? Talk me through that sort of learning experience. What do you do first when you're approaching like a hot, unorganized mess?
Yeah, so I think for me, well, the thing with it is when you're coming into that scenario, it's because they need a designer, that they've recognized they need it. So you don't really need to sell design to them. There might be these different understandings of it, but they've either put a job ad out or they've reached out to their network, so they know they need it. So you don't need to sell them on it. Everyone's on board. And then I think it really depends on, and because I do mostly early stage stuff, there's nuance to that, where the the priorities of what they want to do come in. So with you guys, with where Old Street was at, they were probably, you guys were more at the scale up stage. You'd been through that startup phase of finding product market fit and getting the initial product out. It was then a case of scaling it up. So you had a product out there live, and you just needed to increase the efficiency of the design process to get the developers more things. And then also, as the features were being built out, give the app generally more structure so that as things were being added, they were findable and understood by the users. But what that meant was you had a team of developers ready to be implementing things. So there couldn't be time to, let's just sit and design for 3 months and then give the developers nothing to do for 3 months. You need to come in and immediately start working on features, even if you've not really mapped out the app and understand it yourself, because the priority is there's resources sat on the bench that need things to design. So you can come in and have a better intuition, and that's a big thing that goes into it is intuition, right? Because if you ask most designers, we want to do research, we want to speak to the users, we want to understand the problem, but there is kind of like this steal like an artist. There's a lot of intuition that comes into it, especially early stage, because you cannot research every feature and do loads of iterations. You just need to use your gut, and that's where the team makeup comes in, because with Old Street there was Morgan, who was the product manager and just knew our users so well that we didn't need to research everything a lot, because she had such a deep intuition as to what the outcome and experience would be. So that's when there's a team of developers sat waiting, and oftentimes that is the case. And so there's the resources and what they need to do, but there's also like what the state of the product is in. So there's a couple that I've been working with recently, and that one of them had a product. They were a team of mostly engineers, so they had no real design sense. They weren't happy with how it looked. Users weren't really understanding it, but they knew exactly what they wanted, and it was then kind of a full rebuild. But you were given that space to completely redefine everything, because there weren't too many active users. And then there's another project I was working on where there were developers, but it's much more of a focus on giving it that time to really define the UI at the start. So I think with to answer your question in a roundabout way, it really depends on the makeup of the team and where that company is at. That is the main consideration.
Interesting counterpoint to what Kit and Damon were discussing last episode about the need to do thorough research before we get started. And I suppose, but
it's
that is startup land, right?
Thinking.
Sometimes
it's very
you
blue
don't...
sky thinking.
Oh, we should have you guys debating then.
It's about the balance, though, right?
Sure, but that's the thing. I don't disagree. In an ideal world, you would be researching it more. But even, I don't know how much you want to speak to this, Chris, but getting people on a research call is really hard. And it takes a lot of time, and you need the right incentives, and you really need people to care enough to do it. And that takes a lot of time to get people on to a call and run them through it. And so, yeah, like conceptually, I agree. You do need to research, but realistically, with everything else you've got to do, especially at the stage you're at, do you have the time? And oftentimes you don't.
I mean, I'm on the side always that's like the least that you need to get going. So not to devalue design on our design podcast, but it's like, we know that part of design is guesswork, right? And it's educated guesswork by a skilled person, but we're going, hey, I think that this approach will be what's best for our users based on my other experience. And we just don't know whether the humans will actually use the thing in the way that you're designing them to do, right? You think you will, but that feedback loop is what I always come back to every time.
But there are different schools of thought on that, right? Where you can push pixels in Figma and put wireframes in front of users and ask them what they think about it. But then there's also a really big school of thought of just ship it, like just get it out and get it in front of users and see what they make of it. And I feel like enough time has passed that we can re-raise the term of AI. So I think I'll lose the game there. But to me, that is honestly really one of the most exciting things coming out of it. Is I think against those two schools of thought of the thing that I've always really struggled with research is you put these static screens in front of someone and you're right, wait. Like, just imagine, just picture yourself now. You're sat and you're doing this task and you see this input field. Just pretend something goes into that field. And just, you click that button, just pretend that button goes on to the next page. And with Figma, it's so static that the research, it can be beneficial. People have like a snap intuition of it and they can see the screens, but you're having to do all of this like, oh, please, just like, I know this doesn't work properly how it should, but just pretend it does. And it's like, what is the quality of that feedback really? And that's something I've always majorly struggled with. But with our new best friend AI, that's a changing world. You know, there's so much coming out with it now with Cursor and V0 and Figma Make and all of these things that are allowing designers to have that interaction and be in the code and doing these things that where they don't have to be saying, just pretend you can type into this thing. They can be prompting AI and building these like small prototypes with the components they've got or in the code bases they've got. And they can put it in front of someone and they can say, just use this and go through this flow and tell me what you think. And it really extracts the person, the designer and the interviewer out of that overarching. Just pretend, you know, because I say that all the time and I hate it. And that to me is really where AI is going to have one of the biggest impacts in design. And it's not only limited to designers, and you're seeing this all over the place. Every product manager on LinkedIn loves to talk about how they're using Lovable to create prototypes and create these little tests, because that's the thing, right? It's like, I think designers, there is a specialism there, and there's like a lot of nuance to it, but ideas aren't limited to the designer. And that's the thing, and that's why I like designers. Everyone's got an opinion on it. Not many people have an opinion on code. Not everyone's going to be sat in the dev call talking about the architecture or the security of the feature. But QA, support, CEO, CTO, everyone has ideas because everyone uses products. So everyone has an opinion. So with these new tools, anyone on the team can be prompting AI and say, hey, what if it did this? And what if the feature could look like this? Because before, the only people that could do that were the designer in Figma or anyone with a pen and paper, and you just couldn't communicate what you wanted effectively. So I think that to me is like the most exciting development that's going to come out of it.
Yeah, that was the watershed moment that took the scales off my eyes with my AI cynicism. I was talking to Jens Schumacher, who's a great guy, early Atlassian. He's behind Released, and he's a very good dev. I don't care when a VC bro influencer's posting about what he's doing with AI and vibe coding. But when a senior developer tells me like that, I want to make a wireframe quickly so I can start getting feedback as soon as possible. And this means I can do it in days, what used to take months. Very exciting. Faster feedback.
Yeah. It's just that I think what AI is doing is, in any field, it's lowering the bar to create, to get your idea from your brain and out there. But whenever you're building anything at scale, it requires much more thought, much more security, much more consideration. So I think it's a long while before it's threatening anything at scale. But for collaboration and ideation, it's amazing. And this is an incredibly hotly competitive area at the moment.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. GPT-5 dropped this morning, I think, which will date whenever we release this podcast on things, right? And I remember with 4.5, how the image generation quality in particular jumped. And you were suddenly like, oh my goodness, everything's not as consistently misspelt anymore and that things. And it'll be really interesting to see that evolution over the next 6 months or so, given how much has changed in the last 6 months around that space. I am interested with your initial kind of our tale at the beginning there of the designers being the first to be cut, Marek, with like, obviously the worry for everyone is that as the AI tools go, people get devalued when they can be replaced by DALL-E and what have you. Like, do you see that happening on the ground, or is there still a space for the specialist designer to be the prompt engineer for these AIs?
Yeah, again, right. It really comes down to how much design is understood and valued by the team, and um, again, like we established at the start, it's really variably understood by people. Like I think about a lot of the stuff that I do now, and there's no way an AI could do it because I think a big element of like especially early stage stuff is really thinking about where the product is going to go and what the overall vision is, and then you might not be ready for it now, but you're considering that into the interface and how it's structured and what the future flows will be and future considerations will be, and keeping all of this stuff in mind and weighing it up, where in a world where AI can do that, it can do everything. You know, people talk about this world in which the AI is going to have the ideas and be able to design it and then be able to code it and then be able to market it. And it's like...
For
then,
whom? There's no customers left at that
yeah,
point.
yeah. It's like, at that point, what else is there? So my analogy with AI and the way I see it is, I think with any technological innovation, it gives like the best crop of people more leverage, right? So if you take farming, once you gave 100 farmers a tractor, the top 20% did the work of the other 100 people, right? So there were then 80 farmers that were just shit out of luck, right? The other farmers just bought all their land and started farming it much more consistently, or like much more efficiently. So with any technological innovation, the top crop of people that then make the most of those tools then take up the rest of the work, and they're then much more efficient.
And you've already seen that. I imagine like the Fiverr logos I was discussing earlier, right? That those guys, you don't have to bother some poor Bangladeshi to make
and
something in paint anymore. Like that,
Yeah,
that can
no,
be done.
exactly.
But the problem is the training data for the AI is based on quantity, which is why it's so often slop, because that is the majority of things out in the world aren't beautiful, aren't designed by one of the world's best designers. And so for now, it is very much doing, well, the average of the majority of slop looks like this. So here's another example of it.
Yeah, that is something
And the
I was
people that are
thinking.
hiring people on Fiverr or just doing it themselves on ChatGPT don't care about quality anyway. They just want it done quickly and cheaply.
Yeah, and that's a big thing that I was thinking recently is that low-skilled initial labor that is maybe more for countries like India and the Philippines, and where people have conventionally tried to outsource work. They will probably feel it harder because you can get a £20 subscription to ChatGPT now that gives you that initial ideation, because I think you understand that the step increase in quality, right, that you get from someone that's really professional, but it's just much easier to ideate and brainstorm and take ideas to them and say, hey, we've done this like initial brainstorm, we have a rough idea of what we want, here it is, and then they have their professionalism and their trained eye to then take that and polish it off. The top crop of talent that are then using it more effectively to remove the other 80%. So for me, like the focus is on trying to get myself to that top 20% and leverage the tools and understand how I can use them to be better.
Maybe let's be careful with assuming who's going to make it into the top 20%, right, though. I can imagine there's a lot of startups coming from the areas that have historically done the compete on cost, who are able to move faster, like a little bit less restricted by things. I think it's going to be interesting to see who makes their way into the tractor-owning class of the AI-powered revolution.
Yeah, an excellent point. And I think an interesting thing that's come from this is there's a lot of big, and this is why we're hearing so much about it. It really scares big enterprise, because if 4 people can do the job of 1,000, then the big companies are the ones that lose their competitive advantage, right? The economy of scale of, but we're a 10,000 person company. Cool. 4 absolute killers who know what they're doing with AI could disrupt that.
But the enterprises have the customer base, right? And if they can integrate the AI processes into their teams effectively, then they can just eat up like any innovation, you know? Like I think it's an interesting thing between like Google and ChatGPT, where everyone like my age will be using ChatGPT and will already be kind of glued to it. But all it takes is for Google to like copy a couple of like the good innovations, and everyone that uses, there's the overwhelming majority of people are not early adopters, so they're not going to switch this new thing if the couple features that everyone loves are just taken into this new to the existing product. So that's that classic startup versus big enterprise situation. I don't think is going to change. So it just depends on how easily the big organizations can adopt and take those concepts into their own. Yeah. But I think for me, the exciting thing about AI is, again, like this, it's never been easier to create things. And especially with coding has been such a huge increase in efficiency, right? Like there are people say it's like 10, 20, 50 times as much code that they can write if done in the right way. And I think before, a good software engineering team was always the most expensive part of any business, right? So if there was, if you had an idea and you would think, well, I'm going to have to spend $1 million on a good development team, there were only a certain percentage of ideas that you would justify spending that on. Whereas now it's like there's a 10x, 20x increase in the amount of code that can be written. So the supply and demand, there was never a lack of demand for developers, right? But the supply of code has gone up. So I think most products, like products that you wouldn't justify creating before, will now get created. And I think also things will just become a lot more bespoke, where if you used to have a reception booking tool that would service 10,000 businesses, it was never perfect for any of them. But again, you would only justify spending the money on creating the tool because you could service 10,000 people. So that 100 million, 10,000 person company that isn't perfect for really any of them, I think will then turn into like 10 companies of maybe 100, 200 people that are having more bespoke solutions because they're easier to make, just targeting like sub elements of like hairdressers or salons or whatever that have like these unique features that have been much easier to code for that specific use case. So it will all get much more fractional, is the way I see it going. And in that case, then, especially with design, it's good for design because it's more products to design. So for me, but that's initially, I think that's within the next like 10 years, where all of these ideas are coming out that have always been there. But then the other way I see it as well is that any new innovation, then from it, a wealth of businesses are needed from it. So if you take the tractor, as soon as the tractor was invented, you needed mechanics, you had people that would do the body work, people would make tires for it, people would do the upholstery. So you have all of these different industries that sprout from it. So all of these new industries that sprout from AI businesses. If you look at like podcasting or social media, from social media, you've had influencers and influencer marketing and influencer managers and ad creation for social, right, and editing and all of these things that just because social media got really big, loads of these things and businesses sprouted from social media and podcasting and all of these things. So if there are more businesses being created, there's going to be more businesses that need to be created around that, for which there are more ideas that are needed around it. So I see things getting more fractional, people creating more things, people creating more businesses, from which more businesses need to be created. So to me, I'm not really concerned about it. I just think, and it's easier for anyone to create these things, yeah, and bring their idea to life. So I think it's an incredibly exciting time.
You can see the trajectory of the historical arc where you have, the printing press. Before that, only a select few people could read and write and had the tools. Yeah. Likewise, if the only instrument you had in your village was the church organ, very few people could play that. Whereas now, everyone can play guitar, which is annoying.
Yeah.
but
And then
gives a creative on-ramp for more people, right?
But even there's, I even think about this with the difference between like music and film, right? Where like people were never really struggling to make music before. The problem was distribution. You had like 10 record labels that could distribute music effectively. So there weren't that many musicians really. Whereas now with Spotify, anyone can upload and distribute their music. So music has gotten so fractional. Like every subgenre, people, they're not making incredible livings, but they are making money and being musicians and can tour from it. Whereas if you look at like film and TV, there's a creation problem. You can distribute now through Instagram and YouTube. It's the distribution's not the problem; it's the creation. And if you look at Google's video generation tool, like how good that's gotten, people have stories in their head. People want to create film, but they've not been able to because they don't have the animation. They can't have £100 million film budget. So I think it's allowing people to just be more and more creative.
And more people are then directors rather than having to do the grunt work themselves. If they have an idea, they can see it.
Well, even if you think about,
learn from it.
And even if you think about new industries, right? Like if you're going to have this whole new industry of people creating film from AI based imagery or AI films, right? How many businesses and pieces of software are going to be created around that? Thousands, right? So there's thousands of new products and thousands of new ideas that will need teams of people to make them.
Gentlemen, I don't know why you resisted talking about AI. It was fascinating.
I feel like it's just because you always end up talking about it these days, right? And things there. But like we've gone pretty meta and big with those ones. There'll always be some people who, they're like awesome with those things. The person who's sitting here now going like, help, I don't even have a designer on my team, or I want to employ one and do things well. Maybe like Chris and the gang with their logos at the beginning. Like, what's something practical that you would say that they should put in place now to try and pave the way towards what you've described, Marek, where you're jumping on the bandwagon, making the most of the AI tools, building design systems and things? What's the first baby step that people can take away from this interview with you?
To hire a designer, or like be making the most of the tools?
Let's talk about person. Let's maintain the idea that design is has some value in the investment in a human to do.
I think like have a play with the tools and see how they can work into your process. If you don't have a designer, get a designer. If you need one, let me know. But yeah, if you don't have a designer, get a designer, because it is a completely different skill set that you need. And then I think that the best use of it now is to experiment with your ideas and bring them higher and higher fidelity. So depending on your like technical knowledge, there's V0, Lovable, Figma Make. So there's just these prompting tools that you can speak to and get it to create your components or create pages. It can't really build like huge products super well. It depends. And it's the quality of your prompting, right? So it's garbage in, garbage out. So you have to give it like quite clear instructions. But in that like foundation of what is design and a design process, it's using these tools to have the most confidence that what you're going to build and spend the time to build and market is what you want to make. And these tools just allow you to do it at a higher fidelity. And they're natural language, right? So you can just text and type or speak to them and play with the outcome that you want. So I would just start there. I think that's the easiest place to start. I think there are like really exciting opportunities because I think the limitation of them is they aren't branded, right? And that's where the design system comes in, is that they all look the same, and it's then hard to, even with that, like just imagine it's our brand, right? If you're trying to do a test for Airbnb and you're using these prompting tools, you can tell it to look like Airbnb. You can ask it to make it look like your product, but that's where it's not very sophisticated. So that's like the next step of really making these things look like the products that we've got. And if you've got an existing code base, something I've been experimenting with is, getting into the code and using Cursor, like these AI IDEs, to experiment with like the actual components that are being made and asking it to make the changes that I'm thinking of. Oh, it would be cool if it could do this that you can't do in Figma. But even then, there's Figma Make that is coming in, where it's taking like the screens that you've made in Figma and then trying to turn those into prototypes. So I would say, depending on like the setup and the knowledge that you've got, is just be experimenting with them to see if you can get like a clear idea of the outcome that you want.
And building on that, I would say, Kit, that the main problem for a non-designer communicating with their first designer hire is, look, we always make fun of, can you make it just pop a bit? But that's the problem, that these people don't have the language to communicate. And rather than wasting a human's time, they can go away and play with an AI. And as long as they understand that they're using it as a wireframing tool, right? And they understand that the designer has the expertise to actually turn that into a finished, finalized product that's polished. You can then present, so here were some of my ideas, right, during the ideation phase. Someone can give it better than just bad. If you don't have the language of design, you don't know how to describe what you want, but hopefully you can take some of my terrible GPT prompted things and be like, I was thinking this is what my imagination kind of sees. Can you run with that? And that should be more helpful than, can you make it pop?
Yeah, it's a really good point, and it will probably help to improve your ability to work with designers, because if you can't communicate to an AI what you want, you're not going to be able to communicate that to a designer either. But I think that's one thing I find with working with AI that I don't see everyone else doing, is you can talk to it and get it to teach you and get it to explain these concepts to you, and ask it like, I'm trying to do this, I'm not really sure, can you help me understand what I'm trying to do and how to communicate it?
I trained myself with this, where I would give it an image and say, what would the prompt for this image be? And so it was teaching me how to better prompt engineer. And I think a lot of the backlash to AI comes from, again, these unnuanced people who are new to it, who are excited that they, for the first time in their lives, can make something. And then they post it on LinkedIn and go, look what I made, isn't it amazing? And all the designers are like, no. But it'd be the same if, right, and Kit does this all the time, if I drew a picture on a piece of paper and then posted it on LinkedIn and went, look what I drew, isn't it amazing? Well, no. But as I say, for the uninitiated, right, first design hire ever, I think it is an opportunity for them to start learning much better how to communicate what they want.
But the one I come back to with it is that the cost of failure in that interaction is really low, right? So like, I go to Marek with my garbled idea and ask him to design it. He maybe is polite the first few times, but he thinks less of me, right? And it damages our professional relationship in this case. I can go to GPT, prompt it 25 times. It doesn't, at least for now, think any less of me and do things there. And I think that's really interesting as something that encourages iteration. And it's very against some of the pushback I've seen happening, particularly on LinkedIn, where people are like, design is, or AI is killing the iterative nature of development. We can sit for 6 weeks, come up with the perfect prompt, and then the AI will build it. I'm like, that's not what AI is about. AI is about.
I guarantee designers don't like those 6 weeks of back and forth and terrible feedback.
Right? Yeah.
No, and I think that was one thing you said about not knowing what to tell it and giving it the specific feedback is one thing that I don't see changing at all is people have like real decision fatigue. Like if you're creating a product, there's just a lot of decisions that need to be made. And that's kind of what the different factions break down into is if you're the designer, it's all the decisions around how it will look, how it will work, how all the features will fit together. Like you just have to make a lot of decisions. Even if you can talk to an AI and like help you to make them yourself, there is still just a huge sequence of decisions that have to be made. And if you have different roles, you're just breaking down like who's responsible for which set of decisions. And you can use AI to like help you make those, but it doesn't change the fact that if you want to take something from idea to execution, there's probably 1,000 decisions that you need to make. So you have a team of 4, you're all making 250 decisions. If you have a team of 10, you're all making 100. but that decision fatigue isn't going anywhere.
Awesome, superb episode, gents. Well done. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Should we pick a thing to like highlight from it or something? I feel like we need to do like a wrap kind of section of things.
In summary,
I think it should be one each rather, or maybe Chris narrates it for the end things. I'll call out mine anyway. I really like the steal like an artist thing. Like you mentioned it like six times, and I feel like that whole like know when not to reinvent, know when to use a pattern, know when to go to those things. I think really comes out clearly, and whether it's a human or an AI doing that it comes out. And in fact, maybe AI is the definition of stealing like an artist, right? We're reusing varying quality of things that have gone before.
Yeah, definitely. I think people get, they're like, oh, well, someone else could have just done that. Someone else could have just said, shouldn't we do it like that? And it's like, well, then it kind of just doesn't justify you being there, right? If someone else could have just said, oh, we'll just copy that, then why do we need you here to do that? But that's where the specialism comes in. Is there might be 100 different ways to create a calendar icon, pop up, but you have the taste and you have the knowledge of like for our use case, like which one of these would be better to mimic. Yeah. And
Chris, designer in training. By the end of the first season, you're going to be like creating your first Figma wireframe or something, right? What did you learn from Marek, the incomparable, infallible design guru, from this week?
I see kind of like the musical metaphor to what Marek's talking about. So, still like an artist, most of the great guitarists I know looked up to someone and learnt by copying them or emulating them or jamming along with their records, right? And I think that's where we are with AI prompts right now. It reminds me of the difference between a cover band and the real deal. And yeah, that's what AI is, right? It is a good cover band, right? And that's great. It's not going to blow anyone's socks off. It's not going to revolutionize the world. And by the time it does, we're all out of a job anyway.
Yeah, I've seen some great cover bands, to be fair, though.
yeah, superb. Yeah. But yeah, if you want to just get jamming and get playing, like imitation is a good start. And it's very easy to criticize that and go, well, this isn't original. No, but it's a start.
And when you create all these amazing AI experiences and AI prompts, you're going to need to put them into the design system. And what better design system to put them into than Collabsoft's Jira to Figma plugin? Why don't you tell us more, Chris?
Well, a lot of what you're talking about information getting lost in Figma, it was just so perfect that I was like, I'll just pop up on screen. Like, there you go. If you're having problems with that integration, the integration Collabsoft has built is probably perfect for it. So thank you, Marek, for teeing that up so well. Better than I could myself.
No worries, anytime. Cool. Is that it?